Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're here. Please like and subscribe so I can tell more interesting stories. Now, let's get started. I woke up inside a grave made of ice. No, really. My face was glued to the snow, my right arm completely locked in place, frozen solid. The world around me was a ghost town made of wind and white. No voices, no movement. Just the eerie hiss of the wind scraping against the snow. For a minute, maybe two, I couldn't even figure out where I was or who I was. Then it hit me like a slap from Mother Nature herself, Everest. I was still on Mount Everest. I was supposed to be dead. And frankly, a part of me thought, maybe I still was. My eyelids fought to blink, but my right eye wouldn't open. Frozen shut. The left one barely functioned, offering a blurry glimpse of an endless sheet of white. Somewhere deep inside my brain, I could feel the slow flicker of realization catching fire. I had been left for dead, out here, in this freezer of a mountain. Now, if you've never woken up after being declared dead on Mount Everest, let me tell you, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. It's actually cold. Really cold. Minus 40 degrees, kind of cold, where your skin shatters like glass if you touch it wrong. Fun fact, at temperatures this low, even gasoline turns into jelly. Yeah, let that sink in. I tried to move my right arm. Nothing. It felt like a wooden board nailed to my shoulder. My left arm, though, twitch. Okay. Wiggle. Okay. Move. Barely. My legs numb. Were they still there? I had no idea. At this point, it was a game of guess which body part is still attached. I wanted to scream, but my mouth was frozen half shut. Only a hoarse grunt came out like a broken coffee machine. Somewhere between terror and disbelief, the thought slithered in. This is it. I'm going to freeze to death. For real this time. I could vaguely remember how I ended up here. Pieces of memories floated through my brain like snowflakes in a blizzard. The climb, the storm, the blindness, the moment when my team made that impossible choice to leave me behind. At this point, the rational part of my brain started kicking in, whispering, "You should be dead. Nobody wakes up from this." Historians still debate whether sheer willpower alone can pull someone back from the brink of hypothermic death, or whether it's some freak biological glitch, like how some frogs survive being frozen solid through winter. Honestly, in that moment, I wasn't picky about which one applied. I was just glad I wasn't frog soup. Then something strange happened. No, not a rescue party, galloping up the ridge on snow unicorns. Instead, I felt warmth. Weird, right? Not the kind of warmth you'd expect from sunshine or fire. More like the warmth of giving up. Like my brain was trying to convince me that freezing to death was actually quite cozy. Scientists call this paradoxical undressing, where people dying from hypothermia start feeling hot and stripping off their clothes. Yeah, not helpful, brain. I fought it. I don't know how. But somewhere deep inside, my wife's face popped into my mind. Then my kids. Suddenly dying felt wrong, like an insult. I didn't climb Everest to become a frozen yard ornament. I climbed it because I wanted to prove something to myself, to everyone who ever doubted me, maybe even to the universe itself. And dying here, it just didn't fit the story I wanted. Another realization struck me, one far less comforting. No one was coming. No rescue team. No helicopters. Nothing. Fun fact again, helicopters can't operate at the altitude where I was. The air's too thin. The blades don't get enough lift. Even the best pilots in the world have to shake their heads and say, "Nope, not happening." I forced my head to turn pain shot through my neck like fireworks made of razor blades. I could barely make out the remains of Camp 4 in the distance. Or maybe it was a hallucination. Hard to say when your brain is half frozen and your blood feels like syrup. And then it hit me. I could either lie here and accept that my obituary was being written as we speak, or I could try something, anything, even if it was stupid, even if it was impossible. I grunted. I shifted my left elbow. Thunk. It moved, barely. I pushed my body, grinding my left knee against the icy slope. Crunch. It worked, sort of, like trying to drive a car with two flat tires and no steering wheel. The sound of the wind changed, morphing into what I swear sounded like laughter. Probably my own brain mocking me. Or maybe Everest itself chuckling at yet another fool who thought he could conquer it. Somewhere inside, I knew this wasn't over. Either I was going to drag my broken, frozen body back to camp, or this mountain was going to finish the job. My pulse pounded in my ears. My breath came out in ragged clouds that immediately froze on my jacket. I didn't know how. I didn't know why. But for some reason, I was still alive, and I wasn't done yet. You know, looking back, it's almost laughable how a guy like me wound up here. I wasn't some hardcore mountaineer, born with crampons for feet and an ice axe for a spoon. Nope. I was a middle-aged, balding suburban pathologist from Texas. A guy who spent most of his time staring into microscopes, not mountain ranges. So, how did I end up on the deadliest mountain on Earth? Well, that's a story with a pretty common beginning midlife crisis. Some people buy a sports car. Others get a regrettable tattoo. Me. I decided it would be a fantastic idea to climb Mount Everest. It wasn't exactly out of nowhere, though. I had developed a passion for climbing years earlier. What started as weekend hikes around Dallas turned into bigger ambitions: Kilimanjaro, Denali, Aconcagua. Each climb fed this growing obsession with testing my limits. Every summit left me hungry for something bigger, something legendary. And Everest, well, that's the crown jewel. The top of the world, standing at 29 or 32 feet, give or take, depending on how the tectonic plates feel this year. Fun fact, Everest grows by about a quarter inch every year because of the Indian tectonic plate crashing into the Eurasian plate. Yeah, the mountain's literally getting bigger while we stand here talking about it. My wife thought I was nuts. She wasn't entirely wrong. I'd spent so many years burying myself in work, emotionally checked out, trying to escape my own head. Climbing gave me something nothing else could: a sense of control. Out here it was simple. One foot in front of the other. No office politics. No broken marriage dynamics. No midlife dread whispering in my ear. Just ice air and the next step. But Everest, oh boy. Everest wasn't just another mountain. Climbing Everest isn't just expensive, it's terrifying. You don't just write a check and stroll to the top. You face altitude sickness, frostbite, avalanches, hidden crevasses, and something called the death zone. That's any altitude above 26,000 feet, where the human body literally starts dying. Your cells suffocate. Your brain swells. Your judgment goes straight into the trash. Historians still debate whether the obsession with Everest is about conquering nature or just conquering some demon inside ourselves. Either way, I signed up for the 1996 Everest expedition with adventure consultants led by Rob Hall, a world-famous climber with a stellar reputation for getting people safely up and down this beast. I met my fellow climbers at base camp. A mixed bag, really. Businessmen, adrenaline junkies, adventurers, all chasing some version of the same dream. There was Doug, who was trying to prove that an ordinary postal worker could conquer Everest. Yasuko, a quiet but determined Japanese woman, aiming to be the oldest woman to summit. And there was me, the Texan doctor with more curiosity than sense. Training at base camp felt surreal. Breathing was already hard at 17 to 500 feet, and we weren't even close to the death zone yet. Every breath felt like sipping air through a cocktail straw. Your heart races like you're running a marathon while you're just tying your shoes. One morning, while sipping some instant coffee that tasted suspiciously like wet cardboard, I noticed my hands trembling. Not from cold, but from altitude. Tiny tremors that told me my body was already unhappy with this adventure. But I ignored it. Because that's what you do when you've spent years convincing yourself that pain means progress. The trek from base camp to higher camps was a gradual nightmare. Crossing the Khumbu icefall was like tiptoeing through a skyscraper made of glass that could collapse at any moment. Creaks, groans, and the occasional thunderous crash reminded us that this mountain didn't care one bit about our bucket lists. And yet, there was beauty. Insane, breathtaking beauty. The sun hitting the icy peaks at dawn turned the whole world into a cathedral made of diamonds. The kind of view that makes you believe in something bigger, even if you can't quite name it. But as we climbed higher, the mountain started stripping us down, not just physically, but mentally. Simple tasks became monumental. Clipping into a rope felt like solving quantum physics. Boiling water became an Olympic event. By the time we reached Camp 3, sitting at around 24,000 feet, I started noticing something. Off. My vision. Little fuzzy spots. Things getting dim. I brushed it off at first. Maybe snow glare, maybe fatigue. But a gnawing whisper in my brain said otherwise. Still, the summit loomed ahead. Rob gathered us around explaining the final push. We would leave Camp 4 near midnight, hit the summit by early afternoon, and be back before the afternoon storms rolled in. Simple. On paper, anyway. No one really sleeps at Camp 4. You just lie there listening to your own heartbeat, pounding like a war drum, wondering if this is the dumbest thing you've ever done, or the bravest. As midnight crept closer, I pulled on every layer I had, triple-checked my oxygen bottles, tightened my crampons, and stepped out into the black void above 26,000 feet. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that Everest had a storm brewing, and it had no intention of letting any of us off this mountain easily. Stepping out of Camp 4 into the pitch blackness above 26,000 feet feels like walking into outer space without the courtesy of gravity. The air was razor thin. The wind sliced through every stitch of clothing, and every step sounded louder in my head than it did on the ice, like crunching bones underfoot. We were officially in the death zone, a place where human bodies aren't meant to exist. Up here, your cells start starving for oxygen even when you're standing still. Fun fact: if you were to be magically teleported to this altitude without proper acclimatization, you'd lose consciousness within minutes. Cute, right? The line of climbers snaked ahead, headlamps bobbing like fireflies against a black velvet sky. You couldn't see the summit. You couldn't even see more than 10 feet ahead. All you could do was trust the person in front of you and hope that they knew where they were going. As we climbed higher, the cold became something else. Not pain, not discomfort, just a creeping numbness that felt like my body was turning into stone, one toe at a time. My fingers were so stiff, I kept checking to make sure they were still attached. They were, sort of. By sunrise, the sky turned from ink black to a dull gray, then exploded into a fiery orange over a sea of clouds. It was the kind of view most people only ever see on postcards. But even that beauty came with a sinister edge because the wind was picking up fast. I could feel it before I could see it. A kind of deep, low hum in the air, like the growl of something massive just over the horizon. Everest was waking up, and it was not in a good mood. Then the first flakes started. Not gentle, pretty snowflakes. These were icy needles, stabbing through my goggles, pelting my face. Within minutes, the wind roared like a freight train. Visibility dropped to nothing. One moment, I could see climbers ahead of me, the next gone. Just white. Total whiteout. Rob's voice crackled over the radio, tight and tense. "We've got a problem. Storm's moving in faster than forecasted. Check oxygen levels. Stay together." Great. No pressure. Historians still debate whether the storm that hit us was truly an outlier or just a predictable tantrum from a mountain notorious for killing over 300 climbers. Either way, it didn't matter. We were in it. I checked my oxygen bottle half full. Should have been fine. Keyword should have. The climb slowed to a crawl. The fixed ropes were buried under snow. Every step forward felt like gambling with my life. My legs were heavy. My chest burned. And my vision. Yeah, that little fuzziness from earlier. It wasn't just fuzziness anymore. It was like someone had smeared Vaseline over my eyes. I blinked. No change. I rubbed the inside of my goggles. Worse. Panic started to creep in. Not now. Not here. I turned to Rob, voice shaking. "Hey, something's wrong with my eyes. I can't see right." His head snapped toward me. "Snow, blindness. We've got to get you down. Now." Snow, blindness. Caused by ultraviolet rays, reflecting off the snow, literally burning the surface of your eyes. Imagine a sunburn inside your eyeballs. Fun fact, your eyes don't actually have pain receptors on the cornea, so you don't realize how bad it is until it's too late. I could barely see the rope anymore. Everything was blurry shapes and light. I was officially blind on Everest. Awesome. Just awesome. Rob pulled me in. "You stay clipped to me. We go down together." But going down wasn't simple. The storm howled louder, blowing snow sideways like someone had turned on a giant snow-blasting fire hose. Other climbers were scattered, some still pushing for the summit, others turning back in chaos. The mountain was swallowing people. You couldn't tell where the path was. The lines disappeared under snowdrifts. Even the brightest headlamp barely pierced the swirling white, and Everest didn't care. It never does. At some point, I slipped. One foot went out from under me. Rob caught me with the rope. My heart tried to beat its way out of my ribcage. I couldn't even tell which direction was up anymore. Only the tension on the rope kept me from tumbling into oblivion. My brain started doing that thing where it gets weirdly casual in the face of death. You know, like, "Well, Beck, this is how it ends. Hope you paid your taxes." But Rob wasn't letting go. Blind, half-frozen, and terrified, I clung to that rope, like it was the last thread holding me to the world. Suddenly, over the radio, came another voice, another guide, reporting that several climbers were stranded further up, completely out of oxygen, possibly unconscious. Rob hesitated. I could feel it. The impossible choice. Stay with me, or go help the others. He squeezed my shoulder. "Beck, stay right here. I'll be back. Don't move." I nodded. Or maybe I just imagined nodding. I honestly don't remember. And then he was gone. His footsteps vanished in the wind. The rope went slack. I was alone. I sat, blind, in a storm, on the side of Mount Everest. It's strange what goes through your head in moments like that. I wasn't thinking about dying. I was thinking about mowing the lawn, about my daughter's violin recital, about all the boring little things I never appreciated. The wind screamed. My hands felt like slabs of meat. My toes gone. Not literally yet, but close. I pulled my hood tighter, waited. Minutes, hours? I don't know. Time doesn't exist when you're staring into a wall of white. And deep down, I started to wonder if Rob was coming back at all. You'd think that sitting blind in a storm on Mount Everest would feel dramatic, like some slow-motion movie moment with inspirational music swelling in the background. Nope. It felt weirdly boring. Terrifying, sure, but also just boring in the worst way. Just sitting, waiting, listening to wind that sounded like it wanted to chew me into pieces. At some point, how long after Rob left, I'll never know, I started drifting. Not asleep exactly, but into this weird twilight state where my brain kept showing me random snapshots of my life. Barbecues in the backyard, my kids running through the sprinklers, my wife laughing at some dumb joke I'd made. The human brain's pretty wild when it knows the end is near. It starts handing you the highlight reel, whether you ask for it or not. And then the cold started changing. It stopped feeling cold. Suddenly, it was warm, comforting, like slipping into a hot bath, which for the record is a really bad sign. It's called terminal burrowing. When your body's shutting down from hypothermia, it tricks you into feeling warm and cozy, and people often start digging little holes in the snow like they're trying to crawl into bed. Nature's cruel prank. I knew what was happening. Some part of me whispered, "This is it. You're dying." But another part of me didn't care. It felt peaceful. Meanwhile, the storm outside raged harder, winds gusting over 70 miles per hour, temperatures dropping to -60. Fun fact, at that temp, exposed skin freezes in under a minute. Eyelids, nostrils, lips. Boom, instant frostbite. Sometime later, again, time is fake up here. I felt something, or rather someone. Hands tugging at my harness. Voices, distant, muffled. It was like hearing people talk from underwater. Then came a voice I recognized. Mike Groom, another guide. His voice was tight-clipped. Beck's gone. He's done. Another voice? Yeah, no chance. And just like that, they left. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't heartless. Up here, survival math gets brutal. You can't carry a man who can't walk in the death zone. Try and everyone dies. That's just Everest. Historians still debate whether ethics even apply on this mountain, or whether once you're up here, it's just nature's law. So yeah, they left me. I don't blame them. I really don't. I would have made the same call. The snow piled over me. My face was now half encased in ice. My right arm completely frozen, locked like a mannequin. My goggles were frosted solid from the inside. Not that it mattered, I couldn't see anyway. And then, silence. Not the kind of silence where things are peaceful. The kind where the world stops. No wind, no sound, just nothing. That's when I figured it was over. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything. Just empty. Like someone had unplugged me. I slumped sideways. Couldn't feel it. Couldn't fight it. And weirdly, what haunted me wasn't the dying part. It was the thought of my family. My wife Peach. My kids. Would they know how much I loved them? Would they remember me for being the distant workaholic who always climbed mountains? Or for the father who actually showed up? The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years chasing summits thinking it would make me whole when the real summit was back home. And now, I was going to die on this stupid, beautiful, merciless mountain. But, and here's the part, no one can really explain. My heart didn't stop. My lungs didn't quit. Something deep inside refused. Call it stubbornness. Call it instinct. Call it divine intervention. I don't know. At some point, my brain started whispering, move. Ridiculous. Move what half my body was frozen solid. My right arm was just dead weight. My legs felt like sandbags dipped in liquid nitrogen. But left elbow, wiggle, push, groan, slide. I inched forward, maybe 6 inches, maybe less. Didn't matter. It was something. The wind screamed again, like the mountain realized I wasn't dead yet and wasn't thrilled about it. I kept pushing. Left elbow, left knee, dig, drag, collapse. Repeat. Hours, maybe minutes, who knows? My brain was playing jazz with time. I hallucinated voices, saw shapes that weren't there. At one point, I swear I saw my son standing there in a baseball uniform, hands on hips, saying, "Come on, Dad, get up." Whether that was real imaginary or some weird neurological cocktail of hypoxia and frostbite, who knows? And here's the thing about Everest, it never makes it easy. At one point, I slid sideways into a shallow depression, half buried in drifted snow. Couldn't get out. Couldn't feel my face anymore. Couldn't even tell if my eyelids were open or closed. Then the thought hit me like a hammer. If you stop moving, you die. Simple as that. And yeah, part of me whispered back, so what? Let it happen. Let it end. But then Peach's face, my wife, the kids, my daughter's violin recital, my son's graduation. These tiny little memories came flooding in, like life itself was grabbing me by the collar and shaking me awake. So I moved. Or maybe I just refused to die. Hard to tell the difference. Crawling, falling, crawling again. I aimed for what I thought was Camp 4, or maybe it was a hallucination. Didn't care. If I was going to die, I was going to die crawling toward life. The wind roared. The snow stung. My body screamed. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I don't know how long I crawled. Time up there isn't real. Minutes stretch into hours, hours collapse into seconds. The only clock was the sound of my heartbeat thudding in my ears and the crunch of ice beneath my body every time I dragged myself forward. Every inch felt like a victory against the mountain. Left elbow, left knee, shove, collapse, breathe. If you could call those ragged wheezes breathing. My right arm was useless, just dead weight swinging beside me like a frozen slab of meat. I couldn't feel my fingers, my feet, my nose, or my cheeks. Honestly, I wasn't even sure if all those things were still attached. At some point, the snow thinned just enough that I caught a glimpse, blurry half-blind, of something that didn't look like endless white. A shape, a structure, a tent. Or maybe it was another hallucination. Hard to tell when your brain is cooking on low oxygen and your body's halfway to being a human popsicle. But something primal snapped awake inside me. Camp 4. It had to be Camp 4. I pushed harder, crawling, falling, crawling again. And then out of nowhere, the wind shifted. Just a little. Enough that the whiteout cleared for a few seconds. And there it was. A tent. A real tent. Flapping violently in the wind like it was about to be ripped off the mountain and sent to orbit. I was close. So close, I could smell the faint whiff of propane from the camp stove. Help. I tried to yell. What came out was not a yell. More like a croak mixed with a dying lawnmower, but it was something. No answer. I tried again. Help. Nothing. I dragged myself another few feet. My goggles were frosted inside and out. My left eye barely functioned. My right was frozen shut. I slammed my left fist into the snow, trying to make noise. Bang, 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 and then a shadow. A person. I blinked. Hard to say whether it was real. The figure turned, looked my way, stared. For a long second, nothing happened, just staring. Then the person spun around and sprinted back toward the tents. A minute later, multiple figures were running toward me, voices shouting, hands grabbing at my harness. Someone yelling, "Oh my God, it's Beck! He's alive!" Alive. Barely. But yeah, technically alive. The camp exploded into action. People rushed out with thermoses of hot water, oxygen bottles, sleeping bags. I was half dragged, half carried toward one of the tents. My legs flopped behind me like noodles that had been left in the freezer too long. As they unzipped the tent and pulled me inside, I remember hearing one of the guides mutter, "I can't believe it. Nobody survives this." And you know what? He wasn't wrong. Fun fact, there are less than a handful of documented cases of someone being left for dead in the death zone and walking back. They shoved oxygen masks onto my face. Someone shoved a mug of hot water into my hand, though my fingers were too frozen to actually hold it. Another person started peeling off my gloves. The skin underneath was waxy pale and black in spots. Not good. Not good at all. One guy, Andy, I think, held up my right hand and winced. "Yeah, this is gone," meaning the fingers. Or maybe the whole hand. Hard to say. I couldn't feel it either way. My face was another disaster. My nose. Well, let's just say the mountain decided I didn't need it anymore. Same for parts of my cheeks. Historians still debate whether it was sheer stubbornness, luck, or some freak physiological glitch that kept me alive. Some argue my body entered a metabolic slowdown so extreme that it basically hibernated. Others say it was a miracle. Me, I think it was just not wanting to die with unfinished business. As the adrenaline faded, the pain rushed in like a tidal wave. My skin felt like it was both on fire and frozen solid. Every breath was needles in my lungs. Every movement felt like someone had swapped my bones for broken glass. But I was alive, somehow, against every single odd. I laid there listening to the frantic chatter around me as people radioed other camps, discussed evacuations, tried to figure out whether getting me down was even possible. And that's the cruel thing about Everest. Getting down is often harder than going up. Helicopters can't reach this altitude. Porters can't carry you in the death zone. You either walk or you don't. Someone crouched beside me, a friend, a teammate. His face looked both relieved and terrified. We didn't think. I managed to croak. "Yeah, me neither." The mood in the tent was weird. Equal parts celebration and dread. People were glad I was alive. But nobody knew how long that would last. The mountain wasn't done with us yet. Not by a long shot. The storm still howled outside. And now, the question wasn't just whether I would survive, but whether anyone could figure out how to get me off this mountain alive. Because, out here, being alive isn't always enough. Lying inside that battered tent at Camp 4, I was hit with a strange, almost comical realization. I had pulled off the impossible. I had crawled back from the dead. But now came an even more impossible question. Now what? It's not like there's an Everest ambulance service. No rescue helicopter hovering nearby. No mountain paramedics rolling up with a stretcher. Fun fact, helicopters can't operate above 23,000 feet reliably because the air is too thin for the rotor blades to generate lift. At nearly 26,000 feet, where Camp 4 sat, it was basically the moon with gravity. And let me tell you, lying in a sleeping bag, half frozen, watching frost form on the tent walls, while everyone around me quietly whispered and avoided eye contact. Yeah, the unspoken question was loud. How exactly do we get Beck down without killing everyone else in the process? The guides huddled outside, voices tight-clipped. I caught pieces impossible terrain. Storm still raging. If we carry him, we risk everyone. None of it was exactly the motivational speech I was hoping for. Meanwhile, I drifted between painful consciousness and fevered hallucinations. 1 second, I was in the tent. The next, my brain was showing me scenes of my backyard back in Texas, my daughter practicing piano, my son asking if I'd be home for dinner, my wife Peach, her face floating somewhere between dream and memory. That was the knife twisting in my gut. The truth I hadn't wanted to face before this trip. I hadn't been much of a husband or a father, always chasing something. Another summit, another escape. Climbing was supposed to fill the emptiness. And yet here I was, realizing that what I was really running from was myself. Outside, the storm began to die down. Not much. Just enough that you could step outside without being flung off the mountain like a piece of litter. The team faced a brutal choice. Leaving me behind was still an option, a very real one. People had been left on Everest before. People are still there now, frozen, permanent residents of the death zone. Historians still debate whether Everest expeditions are feats of courage or acts of reckless selfishness. Up here, the line between hero and survivor gets blurry real fast. But against all logic, against every safety protocol drilled into them, the team said, no, they weren't going to leave me. Not yet. I heard someone mutter, if he made it back to camp, maybe he can make it down. Let me tell you, maybe is a pretty flimsy life raft when you're dangling over the edge of mortality. But hey, it was better than nothing. So the plan was, well, there wasn't really a plan. They couldn't carry me. They couldn't drag me. They could barely support themselves. The only real option was the one that sounded like the dumbest idea ever. I had to walk. No, seriously, walk, or more accurately, stumble, shuffle, fall forward repeatedly in the general direction of down. So that's what we did. They stuffed me with as much hot liquid and oxygen as my battered body could handle. My legs felt like hollow PVC pipes filled with broken glass. My right arm, completely frozen, hanging limp against my side like a useless icicle. My face. Let's just say mirrors were banned from the camp at that point for my own emotional safety. 2 guides flanked me, one on either side, like extremely nervous bouncers at the world's worst nightclub. We unclipped from the tent ropes, stepped out, and instantly the mountain reminded us who was boss. The wind was still savage. The footing was ice over rock, over ice, over more ice. Every step was a gamble. Will the crampon hold? Will the snow give way? Is that a snow bridge or a trap hiding a 100-foot crevasse? And me, I was moving about as fast as a snail with arthritis. My left leg stumbled forward. Right leg tried to follow. Half the time, I'd fall straight down my legs, folding like wet cardboard. But the guides, they didn't let go. Every time I fell, they yanked me upright. Sometimes with a curse, sometimes with a grunt. Once with, come on, Beck, you stubborn son of a... Well, PG-13 rating. You get the idea. Step, slide, fall, get up, repeat. At one point, I collapsed face first into the snow and just lay there. My brain whispered, that's it. You're done. Let it happen. But then, Peach, The kids, their faces, their voices. Get up, I growled, out loud, like an animal. Scared the guy next to me half to death. You good? He asked, panic in his voice. Not even close, I rasped. But I'm moving. We inched down the ridge, past spots where hours earlier I'd been sitting blind in the storm, waiting to die. The mountain looked different now. Less like a killer, more like a gatekeeper. One that had decided for reasons I'll never understand to let me pass. The sun rose higher, warming the ice just enough to make everything slippery and way more terrifying. Fun fact: Everest actually gets too hot in the afternoon on sunny days. The snow bridges weaken avalanches become more likely, and climbers have to rush to avoid being cooked while still freezing. Figure that one out. Somehow, by some miracle, stitched together with adrenaline stubbornness and the sheer unwillingness to die, we made it past the worst of the death zone. I could see Camp 3 in the distance like a faded mirage perched on the ledge below. Closer, almost, but Everest. Oh, Everest wasn't done yet. As we descended toward Camp 3, something else was coming. Something worse than the storm. A choice, a gamble, a rescue no one believed was possible. As Camp 3 grew closer, I started letting myself believe, just maybe I was going to survive this. A dumb thought. Dangerous even. Because the mountain, oh the mountain, loves to punish optimism. The slope ahead looked simple enough from a distance. A gentle descent. Manageable. But distance lies on Everest. Always does. What looked like a mild slope was actually a minefield of blue ice rock patches slicker than polished glass, and crevasses hiding under innocent little snowdrifts. My legs were shot, completely. Every step was pure agony. My left leg trembled with every movement. My right, well, it was more along for the ride at this point. My right arm totally frozen, hanging like a plank of wood strapped to my shoulder. But we pressed forward. Step, stumble, catch, slide, curse, repeat. Then we reached the worst part, a sheer drop-off, lined with fixed ropes dangling into the abyss. No railing, no backup, just a line of harness, and the hope that the ice screws some guy hammered into the rock 3 seasons ago were still holding. Beck, one guide, said, voice tight, you gotta rappel. I blinked, or tried to. Remember, one eye frozen shut, the other barely functional. You're joking. Nope. Cool. Fun fact, rappelling with one working arm is basically like asking someone to do brain surgery with barbecue tongs. My brain fired off every possible excuse. No way. Can't. Impossible. But Everest doesn't do excuses. You go down, or you stay. Permanently. The guides rigged the rope, clipped me in, and gave me the world's fastest crash course in How Not to Die 101. One guide rappelled ahead to anchor the line below. Another clipped beside me as a safety backup. Lean back, he said. Let the harness take your weight. Right? Easy. Except my right arm couldn't work the brake. So the guide essentially had to control the rope for both of us while I flopped down the ice like a half-deflated parade balloon. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Half slide, half drop. We made it down the vertical face. My feet smashed into the ice wall repeatedly, knees bending the wrong way more than once. Every impact shot lightning bolts of pain straight up my spine. By the time we hit the bottom, my legs were shaking so bad, the guide actually just grabbed me under both armpits and dragged me the next 10 feet like I was luggage. Then came the good news. Camp 3 was now less than 300 yards away. The bad news, those 300 yards were across an exposed, wind-scoured slope with ice patches slicker than motor oil on glass. Somewhere in there, the wind kicked back up, howling straight into our faces. It felt personal, like the mountain was ticked off that I was still breathing. Every 10 steps, I'd fall. Just boom, straight down. Couldn't even catch myself anymore. My hands were numb bricks. My feet were not much better. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I even had feet at this point. I hadn't seen or felt them since yesterday. But we crawled, walked, dragged, and then Camp 3, a scattering of battered tents huddled against the ice. Safety, sort of. The folks at Camp 3 looked like they'd seen a ghost when we rolled in. One guy just stared wide-eyed, mouth open. Holy, we thought you were dead. Yeah, I croaked. Me too. They shoved me inside a tent, stripped off my outer gear, and hooked me up to more oxygen. Someone handed me a cup of what was supposed to be hot tea, but tasted more like hot sadness. Didn't care. Drank it anyway. Then came the inspection. Okay, one of the climbers said, peeling back my glove fingers. Oh boy. His face went pale. Yep. You're losing those. Pulled back my boot. Toes. Yeah, those two. My nose gone. Parts of my cheeks gone. My right hand, a stiff, frost-bitten claw that didn't even qualify as a hand anymore. But I was alive, barely. And now the question became, how do we get him off this mountain before the next storm hits? Because Everest was already whispering another storm was coming. That's when someone radioed base camp, and against every rule of physics, against the mountain's own laws, against every single precedent ever set, a pilot named Madden Khatri Chetri answered, a helicopter pilot. He was willing to try something nobody had ever successfully done before fly a rescue into Camp 2 at nearly 21,000 feet. No one had ever pulled off a high-altitude rescue from this elevation. Not with a human on board, not with the wind, not with the thin air. Historians still debate whether it was madness, genius, or pure luck that made Madden say yes. The plan was risky beyond belief. I had to somehow get from Camp 3 down to Camp 2, a descent that would normally take healthy climbers hours while being half dead. Then, if the pilot could even get there without the helicopter stalling and dropping out of the sky, maybe, just maybe, I had a shot at getting off this mountain. The gamble was simple. Walk or die. And Everest was watching, waiting. If you ever want to experience what it feels like to make a deal with the devil, try negotiating with Mount Everest while half frozen, half blind, and half dead. The mountain doesn't bargain. It doesn't care about your story, your family, your dreams. It's just rock ice and wind. And it's been killing humans a lot longer than we've been trying to climb it. But here we were trying anyway. The descent from Camp 3 to Camp 2 was, let's just say, unpleasant doesn't quite cover it. It was a mess. A terrifying, slippery, lung-busting mess. First problem, the Lhotse face. Picture a 4,000-foot sheet of blue ice tilted at a 40 to 50-degree angle, peppered with crevasses and rockfall. Now picture someone telling you, yeah, just go down that. Cool, no problem. Except, I couldn't rappel properly. Not with one working arm. Not with legs that felt like cooked spaghetti left out in the snow. So the guides improvised. They basically tied me into a human marionette setup ropes on my harness, front and back. One guy lowered from above, another guided from below. To the casual observer, it probably looked like someone was trying to fly a frozen human kite down an ice wall. Every slip sent me sliding 10-15 feet before the rope caught. Every jolt sent lightning bolts of pain through my frozen limbs. My face numb, my hands useless, my feet pretty sure they were still there. Somewhere, probably. And the wind. Oh, the wind. It blasted so hard It felt like Everest itself was trying to sandpaper me off its surface. At one point, an avalanche roared down a couloir a few hundred feet to our right. Just thunder tons of snow and ice plummeting past. Close enough that the spray dusted over us. Close enough to remind me that even gravity had a sick sense of humor out here. "Keep moving," one guide yelled. "Trying," I wheezed. "Kind of busy." "Dying?" He actually laughed. "Good. Means you're not dead yet." It was grim. It was awful. And it was weirdly hilarious. Because what else can you do when your situation is so absurd it sounds fake? Historians still argue whether our little crawl-fall-slide shuffle down the Lhotse face should have even been attempted. Most say no. Some say it was either one of the dumbest or bravest rescue attempts ever made on Everest. Possibly both. After what felt like a week, but was probably 5 hours, we reached the bottom of the face. The terrain leveled slightly. Not flat, but not vertical ice death anymore. From there, it was a slog through broken glaciers, snowfields, and serac fields, giant tottering ice towers that looked ready to collapse at any moment. My body was failing. Like lights flickering generator, sputtering rats abandoning ship kind of failing. Breathing was a chore. My chest rattled with every inhale. My legs buckled every third step. The guides took turns practically dragging me by the harness. And then we saw it. Camp 2. A cluster of yellow tents pitched on a flattish section of the western Coombe, a wide, deceptively calm valley surrounded by cliffs of ice and rock. It looked like heaven. If heaven smelled like unwashed climbers, kerosene, and instant noodles. We stumbled into camp. The people there stared at me like I was Bigfoot, dragging himself in after a rough weekend. One climber wide-eyed muttered, "Jesus, that's Beck Weathers. I thought he was dead." "Yeah," I croaked. "Me too." No time for celebration. No time for anything. Because that's when the radio crackled to life. Madden's inbound. Madden, the pilot, the absolute madman who had agreed to attempt a helicopter rescue higher than anyone had successfully flown before. Fun fact, the record for the highest successful helicopter landing at the time was lower than Camp 2. Madden was about to roll the dice against physics itself. The problem? The air was so thin, the helicopter would have almost no lift. He couldn't hover, couldn't land like normal, couldn't waste a second. The plan was terrifyingly simple. He'd fly and nose the helicopter toward a slight slope balance on the edge of a boulder. Keep the rotors spinning just enough to avoid tipping. And I had to be shoved inside while the engine strained not to stall. No second tries, no do-overs. The whoop, whoop, whoop of rotor blades echoed through the valley before we even saw it. Then over the ridge, the tiny red helicopter emerged tiny against the monstrous backdrop of Everest's walls. It wobbled, fishtailed, dropped lower, hovered sort of half-resting one skid on the glacier while the other hung in midair. "Move." Someone shouted. 2 climbers grabbed me by the harness, practically threw me toward the open door. Another shoved from behind. My right leg caught the edge. I flopped face first into the cabin like a sack of frozen laundry. The pilot barely glanced back. No welcome aboard. Just throttled the engine and yanked the bird away from the slope as fast as the laws of physics allowed. And then we were flying. The glacier fell away. The cliffs dropped beneath us. The wind screamed. The engine groaned like it was 5 seconds from quitting. But the impossible was happening. I was leaving Everest. As we dropped lower, the air thickened. The engine sounded less desperate. The mountains that had felt like walls closing in now shrank into distant shapes on the horizon. When we touched down at base camp, I barely registered it. Hands grabbed me. Voices shouted. Stretchers appeared. Oxygen, blankets, warmth. And for the first time in days, I realized something. I was going to live. Not just survive, live. The moment we touched down at base camp, everything became fuzzy, like the world was playing on a laggy video feed. People swarmed the helicopter, but their faces were warped distant. I could hear voices, but it felt like someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. Beck, stay with us. Get the oxygen now. Blankets. Blankets. He's ice. Hands grabbed me, lots of them, lifting, tugging, wrapping me in what felt like every single sleeping bag and jacket within a 10-mile radius. Warmth hit me like a freight train. And let me tell you, after being a human popsicle for 3 days, warmth hurts. It's like your skin's on fire. Nerves waking up from frostbite aren't exactly polite about it. My lips barely worked. Coffee, I croaked. Somebody, for the love of God. Coffee. A guy shoved a mug into my good hand. I tried to sip it. Spilled half of it down my front. Tasted like burnt rubber mixed with cardboard. Best coffee I've ever had. Then came the medics' real ones this time. They unzipped my jacket and visibly recoiled. Yeah, one muttered under his breath. He's gonna lose that hand. Fingers, nose, toes too probably. I just blinked at them. Gee, thanks for the pep talk. They laughed. I laughed. It hurt. Everything hurt. But hey, if it hurts, you're still alive. Everest 101. Soon after, a larger helicopter arrived, one that could handle lower altitudes. They loaded me up like cargo, strapped me down, and off we went. Down, 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 leaving the icy cathedral of Everest behind. As the mountains shrank in the distance, something inside me shifted. I realized I wasn't the same man who walked onto that mountain. The version of me that left Texas, the workaholic, the emotionally distant husband, the guy who thought climbing could fill a hole inside him, that guy had died somewhere up there. Maybe on the Lhotse face, maybe in the snowdrift, where they left me for dead. Either way, I wasn't him anymore. The flight ended at a hospital in Kathmandu. Doctors swarmed me. Tests, IVs, fluids, blood work, x-rays, you know all the fun stuff. A surgeon held up my right hand, examined it like it was a science fair project gone horribly wrong, and sighed. We can save, maybe the thumb. Maybe. Cool, I mumbled. Didn't like those fingers anyway. The nurses stared at my face. The frostbite was bad. My nose was black. Cheeks swollen, skin hard as marble. Lips split like paper. One nurse whispered to another, "He looks like a wax figure." One left too close to a fire. Yeah, real boost to the old self-esteem. Meanwhile, the hospital phones wouldn't stop ringing. News had spread. A guy left for dead on Everest had walked back. Reporters, journalists, TV crews. Everybody wanted the story. But the only call I cared about was to Peach, my wife. The nurse handed me the phone. My hands shook so bad, I almost dropped it. The line clicked. Then, her voice. Beck. I swallowed. My throat felt like sandpaper. Yeah, it's me. There was silence. Then a sound I'll never forget, her sobbing. Not loud, not dramatic, just soft, broken. I thought you were gone. Me too, I whispered. Me too. That conversation. It changed everything. We didn't say much. Didn't have to. Something unspoken passed between us. Something raw. Something real. Like everything that had ever mattered was finally painfully clear. And that's the thing Everest does to you. It strips you bare. Peels back every layer of ego, pride, insecurity. What's left? The truth. The people who matter. The life that matters. I spent the next few days being poked, prodded, bandaged, medicated. Slowly, painfully, my body started thawing. The damage? Oh yeah, it was bad. My right hand, gone below the wrist. Several fingers, on the left gone. Nose gone. Parts of both feet gone. But life wasn't gone, not even close. Doctors flew me back to the States where more surgeries awaited. Skin grafts, amputations, rehab, physical therapy that made me want to scream. Days where I questioned if surviving had even been the right choice. But then, I'd hear my kids laughing in the next room. I'd hear Peach humming in the kitchen, and I'd remember, yeah, it was worth it. Funny thing, historians still debate whether the 1996 Everest disaster changed the way we look at adventure, or whether it simply reminded us that nature doesn't play by our rules. Everest doesn't care how rich you are, how brave, how prepared. The mountain always decides. And me, I walked away with something a lot of climbers never get: a second chance, a chance to rewrite the story, not on Everest, but down here, where life actually happens. Back home in Texas, everything felt louder, brighter, realer. After weeks of nothing but ice wind and the color white, the world looked almost offensive in its color. Green trees, blue sky, the smell of wet grass. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. But reality, oh yeah, it hit hard. I wasn't the same guy who left for Everest. Physically, mentally, emotionally, I was rebuilt from the ground up. And not all of that was pretty. Let's start with the obvious: my right hand gone. They had to amputate it below the wrist. My left hand lost most of the fingers. My feet, well, let's just say I won't be winning any marathons. My nose reconstructed from skin grafts. Doctors basically borrowed bits of my ear, my forehead, and other places to rebuild my face. It's funny, you never realize how many things require a nose until you don't have one. Sunglasses, for example. Or sneezing. Trust me, sneezing without a nose is a whole different adventure. The surgeries were endless. The rehab felt like medieval torture mixed with a bad gym membership. Stretch this. Bend that. No, it doesn't matter that it hurts. Do it anyway. The worst part, learning to do simple things again. Button a shirt. Open a jar. Tie my shoes. Things that used to take seconds now took full concentration and more swear words than I care to admit. But you know what? That wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was facing the man I'd been before Everest. See, I hadn't just been running toward mountains. I'd been running away from my life, from my wife, from my kids, from myself, always chasing something bigger, something harder, something more dangerous, trying to fill some hole inside me that, turns out, wasn't Everest-shaped after all. Peach, my wife, she had every right to leave me. Before the climb, we were barely hanging on. I was physically present but emotionally AWOL for years. But instead, she stayed. Maybe because almost losing me reminded her why we fell in love in the first place. Or maybe almost losing me reminded me why she mattered more than anything else ever could. Funny thing, historians still debate whether surviving Everest changed me or simply revealed the version of me that was buried under years of distraction and ego. Either way, I wasn't the same. I started speaking. Publicly. About Everest. About survival. About second chances. Turns out, people are weirdly interested in how you survive, being left for dead on the highest mountain on Earth. Who knew? But I always made sure to tell the real story. Not the heroic, glossy magazine cover version. The messy one. The broken one. The one where you realize that climbing Everest doesn't fix you. It doesn't make you whole. It doesn't make you a better father or husband or man. The real summit was down here, learning to show up, to be present, to love, to forgive myself, to forgive others. People often ask me if I'd do it again, if I'd go back to Everest knowing what it cost me. And honestly, no, because the real climb wasn't Everest. It was coming back down, back to my family, back to myself. I started appreciating the little things. Morning coffee that didn't taste like burnt plastic, the sound of my daughter laughing, the way my son rolled his eyes when I told dad jokes, holding my wife's hand, what was left of it anyway. Life got simple. Not easy, never easy, but simple. Breathe, love, be present, repeat. And as for Everest, people still ask me if I have nightmares about it, about the cold, the wind, the moment I realized I'd been left for dead. Sometimes, yeah, but more often, I dream about the crawl. The moment I realized I wasn't ready to give up. The moment I realized life was still worth fighting for. Everest didn't beat me. It changed me. And maybe that's the point, because sometimes the mountain doesn't teach you how to climb higher. It teaches you how to come home. And so, as I sit here now, years later, sipping my coffee, feeling the sun on my face, I can't help but smile. Not because of what I did on Everest, but because of what came after. You know, life has a funny way of reminding you what matters. I used to think it was about summits, about proving something, about being more, climbing higher, going farther. But the truth is, it's never really about the summit. It's about the people waiting at the bottom. It's about the hands you hold, whether you've got 5 fingers or none. It's about showing up for the small moments, the quiet ones, the ones that never make the news. Breakfast with your family, a random Tuesday afternoon, laughing at a bad joke, sitting quietly beside someone you love. Everest took pieces of me, my hands, my nose, my feet. But what it gave me, what it forced me to understand, was that I had been missing something far more important for years. And maybe that's the real lesson, that the greatest rescue, the greatest climb, isn't about escaping a mountain. It's about coming home, to yourself, to the life you were too busy to notice before, to the people who never stopped waiting for you. So, yeah, I'm still here, a little broken, a little stitched together, but alive and grateful. Thank you for listening to my story. Please like and subscribe so I can share more stories like this with you. And remember, sometimes the hardest mountains are the ones we climb inside ourselves.